My name is Tony Colson. I am a consultant for Strategic Applications International. I am also a retired Assistant Special Agent in Charge for the Drug Enforcement Administration. While serving with the DEA, I have had many experiences with developing, working within, leading, and managing various types of task forces in a local, state, national, international, and even Indian country environments. It is an honor to help guide you through this training. Task forces can take any size and shape that you need. It can be very formal, like the Native American Drug and Gang Initiative in Wisconsin, or a handshake agreement, like the one between the Coquille Tribe in Oregon and the United States Coast Guard. It can be enforcement specific, training centric, or intelligence networking. Here's an overview of the learning goals of this module. As a participant, you will be able to envision the environmental elements needed to establish a task force. You will know what is needed to navigate the political terrain to garner community support to establish a task force. You will know how to gather the necessary resources to sustain a task force, and you will be provided examples on how to adapt the task force to overcome environmental and political barriers. Foundational problems. Drugs, guns, and human trafficking are organized criminal activities, led, in most part, by non-tribal, non-resident individuals and groups. It requires specialized policing practices by highly trained law enforcement officers who are appropriately resourced. These resources can be costly. These external impacts on a tribal community overwhelm the tribal government and their public health and safety agencies. Before a police department throws together personnel and resources towards any problem in the community, they need to establish some foundational issues. Persistent criminal activity is a criminal event that occurs within a defined area that adversely impacts the quality of life of the members of that community. Drug trafficking, human trafficking, and property crimes are a few examples, but are not exclusive of other defined criminal actions. Extrajurisdictional is persistent criminal activity that occurs across political, state, or jurisdictional boundaries, where two or more law enforcement or police agencies are impacted by the criminal activity. Where existing resources are not adequate to address the criminal activity within a tribal community, many tribes are in need of specialized positions, like detectives, to effectively target criminal activity. Funding to employ additional staff or resources and equipment to practice effective policing. Multi-community recognition is where two politically different communities recognize there's a problem that needs attention. For example, two adjacent governing bodies and the communities agree that the problem spans both communities and it is persistent and needs to be addressed by a coordinated effort by the communities to resolve the problem. Once a community has recognized the problem and is in support of implementing these four elements, the foundation for a task force has been established. In the next slides, you will see that this process mapped in the middle are the foundational blocks for coalition building and community policing. Recognized need is the understanding that foundational problems are present in the community. Political will is the government's interest in or motive to take action based on the recognized need. Community investment is seeking the advice of the electorate through town hall meetings, tribal council meetings, and listening sessions to fully articulate goals, informing the community about the investments, and action steps to be made in order to solve the community's problems. Community buy-in is the consent of the community to move forward with problem-solving measures through the creation of a task force or a tribal and non-tribal law enforcement partnership. The establishment of a task force can be created from two or more combinations of these governments or law enforcement agencies. Larger partnerships with more government agency representation can equate to stronger consensus and a more robust resource pool to bear on foundational problems. It is important that any task force be strongly led. An oversight board consisting of leadership from participating agencies is the governing body. The board sets the rules, creates policy, and provides guidance and supervision to the task force or unit commander. The task force commander is the executive officer that provides day-to-day supervision of task force work and mission. There are many avenues for funding resources that can sustain a task force. Federal grants are key to any formal task force sustainability. Understanding the cost benefits of federal funding can help task force leadership make the best choices regarding where to apply and what to expect in reporting and management. Agency in-kind funding is the funding and resources that come with the officers assigned to the task force from various regions or departments. Will the agency supply a government vehicle, safety equipment, radios, and the officer's salary and benefits as their in-kind contribution? Those in-kind contributions to the task force will aid in the receipt of federal matching grant funds. Asset forfeiture, the proceeds from the assets that the task force seizes as a result of their operations, can be used to supplement certain budgetary needs of the task force. Confidential source payments, drug buy money, and operational expenses are a few examples of how asset proceeds can be used by a task force to offset budget needs. Asset forfeiture guidelines are usually directed or dictated by the state or federal government and should be assessed at the formation of a task force. Additionally, the application of this funding is reserved to the oversight board. To help guide you on task force development, we have interviewed tribal police chiefs from 5 tribes representing different regions of the United States. These task forces that will be discussed were formed with different kinds of partners to solve unique problems presented to the tribal communities they serve. First taking shape in 2007, the United Tribe of Wisconsin's police chief, Rich Van Boxtel, has been one of the leaders in the establishment of a special task force in Wisconsin's Indian Country. The Native American Drug and Gang Initiative, NAGI, is dedicated to sharing information and combining investigative resources to reduce violence and crime in and around Wisconsin's tribal lands. NAGI is an example of a well-funded, mature task force with strong leadership and formal management structure.
Prior to 2007, the Wisconsin Tribal Police Chiefs were meeting, and what we were discussing was the issues that we're having in common. We're sharing some of the same issues related to drug and gang activity done by the same folks, and they were moving from reservation to reservation, and we were able to kind of figure out who they were and what they were doing. We just didn't have a mechanism on how to share that information with the officers on the street, at the street level. You know, anecdotally, we had some of that information from the police chief level, but how do we get that down to the street cops, and how do we share that between the reservations? Because there was really the only networking that we had was at the police chief level, and I think one of the things that we needed to do was to open that network up. So we reached out to the Wisconsin Department of Justice Division of Criminal Investigation to ask them how we could do that by setting up a drug task force, whether when we were prepared to do it by ourselves with their help or with funding from the state. And we went through the process to become Wisconsin's 18th recognized drug task force in Wisconsin. So we were able to get not only the recognition, but we were able to get some funding. We were able to get the statewide information sharing system called ACES that we currently use now and have used since then. But it's a way for us to share that information between the tribes at the officer level. The officers are all trained to use it, to pull out the information as they need it. And we've been able to create a network across the state that we're able to do things at a tribal level that we weren't able to do before.
So how do all the tribes benefit in terms of actually looking at a problem on their reservations? Does this bring resources to that problem?
It brings a whole bunch of resources. Over the years we've done several different types of operations. We've done some saturation stuff. We've done some long-term stuff, and we've done some things where we bring in a group of officers tribal officers from across the state to one specific reservation, and we're able to do like a 4-day operation. Part of it is doing some of the undercover work. Part of it is doing knock and talks. Part of it is doing the information gathering and the short-term investigations, and then which leads up to being able to do search warrants and make those arrests for those folks that we're able to generate the cases for. So it makes a huge impact on the reservations by not only bringing in manpower resources, but there's also a bunch of other things, equipment and such that we've been able to bring into these reservations to make their jobs easier and to make an impact on the drug and gang issues that are on those reservations. So we can bring in boots on the ground in a relatively short amount of time, and many of these issues that we have, these large-scale issues that we have, are gang or drug related, and we can bring them in. For example, Oneida had a homicide a couple months ago, or about a year ago, and because there was a drug and gang nexus to it, we were able to bring in some folks and get those resources, those manpower resources in here to help us with the investigation.
That's right. How is NAGI funded?
We are, as a recognized drug task force in Wisconsin, we get the normal funding that the state provides to any other drug task force in Wisconsin. So that's pretty much what how we're funded. We've received a few grants over the years, but for the most part, it's simply based on that funding that we get from the state. It's not a lot, but it's enough to do to pay for overtime and for some training and equipment and buy funds. The routine, normal day-to-day stuff, the individual departments just kind of pick up because none of our officers are assigned to NAGI full-time. They're all doing it kind of on a part-time basis as they can fit it into their schedule. But there's no full-time person that's all that they do, other than our task force commander, who is a employee of the Department of Justice. He's the one that kind of runs everything at the street level, coordinates all the activities and all the operations across the state. But our funding is basically a small pool of money that we get from the state, and then the rest of it is just swallowed by the police departments themselves.
You're in chair of the Advisory and Oversight Board. What are the things that the Advisory and Oversight Board do?
we're tasked with having the oversight of what's going on. We don't so much get into the approve such things as the operations. Large-scale purchases we need to be involved with, making sure that our folks are providing the documentation, because like with any other law enforcement activity level or activities, there's reports that need to be generated, and being able to collect and capture those statistics is important to those grant folks. So we're overseeing the operations from the overall level to see if there's things that we need to do to make sure that we're staying true to the mission of NOG as a whole. We don't say, yes, we're going to do this operation here, or no, we're not going to do it there. We're simply here to make sure that we have the resources for our folks out there on the street to be able to do their jobs and to do their jobs well, which I think we've been able to do quite well over the years.
The four Sioux tribes of Minnesota, Mille Lacs, Leech Lake, Upper and Lower Sioux, needed to work together based on cultural bonds. These cousin Sioux tribes have distinct relationships that will be leveraged to provide more public safety services to their Ojibwa people. Police Chief Jared Rosati of the Mille Lacs Band is the executive agent of this task force. Chief, why did you form this task force?
We decided to form the Great Nations Task Force basically because our gang activity on our various reservations is unique in the fact that they're not territorial in the sense that most gangs traditionally have had a 6 or an 8 block area that they're very territorial over, and they hold that piece of ground. With native mob and now the native style coming into play, they are not territorial. They go from reservation to reservation, and they bounce from criminal activity. They don't discriminate, so they go just about anywhere in the 5-state area actually on reservations. We as police are a little bit behind the times in keeping tabs on these guys due to the fact that they don't stay in one place. We call it res hopping. And so what we've done is try to get as many. We started out with 4 different tribes from Minnesota, geographical areas that are working together, sharing information with one common commander who's taking all the information and putting it into one spot so we can actually track and trace this gang activity or movement. And that was the main reason we put this together. The best benefit we have is the information sharing. Along with this task force, we've also signed a joint powers agreement where we can actually share resources. So, say if I have a critical incident in my jurisdiction, a homicide, triple homicide, whatever it might be, I can call on my 3 partners in this, and they can actually send me officers, equipment, whatever I might need in that situation. So it's really helpful, especially to the reservations who don't have a very big police force. It's very nice that they can call and we can show up and give them a hand with whatever they need.
The 9 Tribes Task Force is in development as a formal relationship between the 9 tribes of Northeast Oklahoma. Only 4 of the 9 tribes have a law enforcement capacity. The task force provides smaller tribes assistance in policing their communities, specifically on drug-related crimes. Outside funding is insignificant, necessitating a reliance on in-kind services of each tribe to provide resources to address the needs within the region. Additionally, the task force is dependent on county and district prosecutors, county sheriffs, local municipal law enforcement agencies to address the criminal element that flows in and out of their tribal communities. Chief Kendall Murphy is chief of Wyandotte Tribal Police, also a leader in Oklahoma tribal policing.
Well, it's been in different stages of organization over the past few years as some tribal leadership changes and membership to the task force changes. We currently have several members that are still active that have narcotics interdiction and investigators that are working closely together to resolve area problems rather than just individual jurisdictional problems.
Some tribes have law enforcement, and some tribes don't in Northeast Oklahoma. Is that correct?
Well, I think they all have access to law enforcement. Some tribes are still supported by BIA law enforcement, where about half, at least in our general area, have their own police departments.
How do you try to fund this? Is it in-kind services? Do you look for grants from different places?
It's heavily grant supported, and that's how the organization, I think, became initially funded, was through their personnel grants, through the meth programs, and to be able to staff the drug positions. Now the tribes have, it's easier once you've shown the benefit of having a task force and a robust system. Once it's in place, and most of the tribes continue to fund those positions as they can. Well, now in your questions, you asked about the benefit from it, and
correct.
I think it's obviously the efficiency and cost sharing, and strengthening partnerships and developing the one team concept. But it's not only personnel. It's specialized skills and equipment that many of the tribes don't have, or we can eliminate some redundancy by collaborating and deciding what resources that each tribe can bring to the table, and then the key expanded intelligence gathering capabilities that has been valuable by everyone working together.
The Indian Country Intelligence Network, ISIN, is not a task force in a traditional sense. It is a unique and sustained intelligence sharing group of the 22 Arizona tribes. ISIN has grown to include state, local, and federal agencies that partner with Indian Country. They share criminal intelligence information, come to agreements on how that intelligence will be used by the member tribes, and work collaboratively in ad hoc task forces to effectively address criminal activity within the 22 tribes. The founder of ISIN, or one of the founders of ISIN, is Carl Auerbach. Carl is the Assistant Chief of Police for the Salt River Pima, Maricopa Indian Community. Carl, tell us about ISIN.
Absolutely. Our Indian Country Intelligence Network, or ISIN, was established in 1994. This dates back about 20 years ago. At that time, the Salt River Indian Community and the Gila River Indian Community were experiencing a crime that we believe was being perpetrated by the same suspect. I had reached out to a couple detectives who I knew at the Gila River Indian Community, Agent Roy Janish and Agent Mike Medicine Hat Ziliox. We got together, of course, over lunch, and I remember that lunch really well. And we discussed pattern and trend analysis about the case, and we had shared information and intelligence with one another, because at that time there was an absolute delta, there was a void. There was no collaborative environment within Indian Country in the state of Arizona or anywhere in the nation where we could get together and exchange information and intelligence. As it turned out, when we shared the information, we were able to work together as collaborative, uniting police partners in an effort so we could track, follow, and subsequently apprehend that predator, and that individual was prosecuted, and we protected both of our communities. We found that collaborative environment and the ability to share information and intelligence among Indian Country policing professionals was really important to us. At that time, we had shared that idea, the idea to develop an association. As I had said, there was no association that existed prior to that, and we formed our intelligence, our Indian intelligence network in 1994. And since then, we've been able to meet on a monthly basis with all 22 tribes in the state of Arizona to share information and intelligence for our mutual mission.
Has this led to cooperative efforts as you meet monthly? Do you come up with projects or certain criminal activities, persistent activities that then you and other tribes can align together to work on them? Has it led to building more formal task forces on certain issues?
Yes, it has, Tony, and in fact, we've been able to develop ad hoc task force operations between multiple jurisdictions, or what we would call multi-jurisdictional task force operations. Many of these task force operations included local, municipal, tribal, county, state, and federal operations. One highlighted task force was a special operation that was called COIL, Crimes on Indian Land. And it was the first special operation of its kind that involved a collaborative environment, tribal, local, municipal, county, state, and federal professionals all working together as one team with one mission to serve and protect our communities. And it resulted ultimately in the arrest of many very violent perpetrators that were committing crimes all over the Valley area, and they were prosecuted ultimately by the United States Attorney's Office. Since then, and over the last 20 years, although it's not a task force in the traditional sense, but we have a unique and measurable and sustainable results-oriented organization that provides training and a collaborative atmosphere for all of our tribal team members to work with local, municipal, county, state, and federal the way that it should be, so we can work in this large, collaborative, and united policing partnership environment.
Very good. With ISIN, is it just law enforcement, or who else participates in the ISIN meetings? Not only outside tribal communities, but inside the tribal community. Is it just law enforcement, or are there other members of tribal governments that participate?
ISIN's comprised of law enforcement executives from tribal, local, municipal, county, state, and federal, and also our correctional professionals, as well as representatives from BIA, FBI, United States Attorney's Office, Arizona Department of Public Safety, municipal agencies, and other professionals, including tribal, state, and federal prosecutors. We found that our association, our Indian Country Intelligence Network Association, opening the opportunity for a larger environment for this collaboration of professionals, whether they're tribal, local, municipal, county, state, or federal, has created a very robust collaborative partnership. And we've also teamed up most recently in the last 5 years or so with other government, law enforcement, and businesses. So we can share information and work in this collaborative partnership to best serve and protect our communities. ISIN genuinely represents what our policing mission is. One team, one mission. Serve and protect our communities, county, state, and nation. And it takes committed, courageous leadership to chart a journey and to ultimately make a difference. And we're very, very proud of what our ISIN Association as a group and as an association has done for our state and also ultimately nationwide. So this is a great example, model example of a collaborative, united policing partnership that really works and makes a difference in our communities.
Scott Lefevre is the Chief of Police for the Coquille Tribal Police.
In working with the U.S. Coast Guard, not only are we cooperating with two agencies that have a limited funding base, limited budget, but what we're able to do is we work within the same community, and we also have a lot of property that is along the waterway, and we are less than, our actual reservation is less than three minutes away from the Coast Guard station in Charleston. So what this allowed us to do is to have an advantage in conducting patrols and just going to talk with them, advising that they have a limited amount of staff, we have a limited amount of staff, they have certain equipment we could use, we have certain equipment they can use, and just come to a common sense that we can help each other out very easily without adding any fuel cost or budget issues or anything like that, yet we're achieving the same or common goal. And pretty much that's exactly what it is when they need, they don't have a drug recognition or canine handler at their office, everything's out of Seattle. We're 3 minutes away, and so it became real easy to have a common ground as to say, well, we need this. We have 16,000 forest acres that it's very hard for us to patrol. Well, they have a helicopter that flies that pattern almost daily. So it was very easy just to go, here's a common problem, here's a simple fix to it with no additional cost to them where they have to go out of their way to do this. Same with us. So it was just a very, it's simple. Just go talk to them, find the common ground, and we came up with a solution. And it just was like a puzzle. You put it together, and it just, was complete, and it looked very good. And it's just been a good working relationship from then on. And from the start of that, it's kind of like a tree. We have many limbs or branches. So now we broadened out to do different things, finding out we have same common ground, like with training, so forth like that. We assist with training. They do the same for us, and just kind of going on from there. So it works out really well. We also, kind of like when I went over, you just have a tree and you have branches. And those were some of the different topics we came up. We were like, oh, what about this? So we then also talked about emergency management. And, the Coast Guard, in Coos County, there's only 2 designated landing zones within Coos County during the event of a tsunami and a Cascadia event. And none of those are within our area. But the tribe happens to have a lot of, like the forest, our tribal forest has a lot of open areas. And so right in our Kilkitch community, we have a nice, huge, cleared pattern area where, we asked the Coast Guard if they wanted to tentatively have that as an availability for this area. And sure enough, they did a couple practice landings and said, yes, it sufficed with them that they could land the helicopters there, and they even advised they could probably land military-grade helicopters there. So we're still working in the process of getting that listed. But yeah, that was one additional thing to do was, add emergency management and tsunami events and to work together, in that. The tribe, they're very supportive of this. So are the tribal members as well. This, like I said, it's a common goal. And when I report and am able to report back advising, we now have additional patrols of our forest. And this could be like, it makes, because we have a lot of wooded areas, so a lot of times tribal members are out berry picking, taking just mushroom picking, stuff like that, taking some of our, cultural items from our forest, which they're allowed to do by permit throughout the year at various times. And so now this can add, and they've come and mentioned to me. And they say, oh, yeah, we saw the helicopter fly over, and it made them feel good saying, that's so neat to see that we know somebody's looking out for us in a way. And it's from a helicopter, which there's no way the tribe could ever have a helicopter with a pilot. Yet, we've just done a very simple task of saying we're all in the same area, we all patrol the same area, can we just do this if we do that, kind of thing, just an agreement. And so, yes, it's been very supportive and positive from both ends. And then via the water, we have our casino and hotel and a lot of other tribal property along the waterfront on the bay. And so what the Coast Guard's also been doing is they do their normal patrols. They actually slow down and do a special patrol, check under the dock, kind of like that with their 47-foot boats. And so we've had positive feedback just from guests seeing that. And so, and it's vice versa for us, where we help the Coast Guard housing staff. So we'll do extra patrols, in that area as well. And so then their members have complimented to their staff about seeing our patrol vehicles go through there. So it's just all around nothing but positive, and you're reaching and doing a common goal.
We have provided you foundational questions, explored the environmental factors that impact decisions, and had tribal law enforcement leaders share their experiences with you. All this to show that you have it within your tribal community to overcome barriers, solve problems, and create solutions that best serve your people.